Well, good evening, everybody. We are now ready to start. It's very, very good to see everybody. This is a seminar hosted by the Network for Oratory and Politics, which is a network based at Glasgow University, although spreading its links to Edinburgh and St Andrews and elsewhere. And we have a paper presented here in Edinburgh, hosted by the Network for Oratory and Politics once a year. And so today is the 2016 lecture, and I'm going to introduce our speaker, who is Professor Mike Edwards of the University of Roehampton. And Professor Edwards is Professor of Classics and Head of Department at Roehampton, and he's also has huge administrative responsibilities because he is head of several schools there, and so has a very heavy administrative and managerial responsibility as well as his responsibilities in classics. He is also president of the International Society for the History of Rhetoric, and his specialisms are primarily the Attic orators and Greek rhetorical theory, but he also has written extensively on ancient biography and on Latin poetry. He has a dozen or so books either published or in press, including editions and commentaries on a number of different Attic orators. He has books on Plutarch and on Statius and Claudian. He has three major current projects, all of which I think are leading to books to be published next year, at least according to your website. They're scheduled to come out next year. There's a Greek rhetorical manuals project, which is leading to a commentary on pseudo-homogenes progymnasmata. There is an OCT of Isaeus, and there is a commentary on Aeschines 3. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Professor Edwards to Edinburgh today, and in this lecture he will be talking to us on the subject of From Inventio to Actio, Some Thoughts on Greek and Roman Rhetorical Theory and Practice.
You should wait till you've heard it. Yes. That way? Or that way? Does that make it better? Yeah. Thank you, Dominic, for a typically generous welcome. Yes. Thank you all for coming. I hope you'll applaud me at the end if you're still awake. It's actually a delight and a great honour for me to speak to you this evening at the Distinguished Edinburgh Classics Research Seminar. I know it's this week in the guise of the Network for Oratory and Politics, so I thank Henrietta van der Blom for inviting me and to Dominic for hosting me. As Dominic said, I'm currently the president of the International Society for the History of Rhetoric, and I hope that some of you at least will be able to come to the conference in London next July. And standing here, I'm reminded of my first ISHR conference, which was held in Edinburgh in 1995. The president then was Peter France, who I'm sure some of you will know, now Emeritus Professor of French here. And I remember emailing him. Yes, I think we did have email by then, just to ask if a paper on classical Greek oratory would be welcomed by that conference. I did not know at the time that the classical rhetoricians had a smallish but distinguished group within the Isha conference, including scholars like Michael Gagarin, Bob Gaines and Harvey Eunice on the Greek side, Chris Craig, Jim May, Jaap Visser on the Latin side. That's where I met them all. That group has grown exponentially over the years, and it's a similar story, I think, with the study of ancient oratory. Edinburgh, as you all know, has had its Regius Chair of Rhetoric and English Literature since 1762, and Hugh Blair. And I recall that Peter France was the incumbent when he was president of Isha, though there's no mention of this in his British Academy biography, so perhaps my memory is failing. But I note that the webpage of the current incumbent, Greg Walker, sadly only mentions rhetoric in his title, although he's obviously very distinguished as a professor of English literature. Going back a few years, Douglas McDowell at Glasgow and Stephen Usher at Royal Holloway were flying the flag for the orators when I took my PhD in 1982. And there are some others, but I do not recall there being a great deal of interest in the Attic orators at the time. Rather the opposite. As for Cicero, when Stephen Usher and Malcolm Wilcock retired from the University of London, my memory, which may be faulty, is that there was for a time no one teaching the Cicero special subject paper in the University of London. And indeed, when I asked Malcolm Wilcock if he would be interested as editor of the Arison Phillips series in a commentary on a speech of Cicero, he said there would be no demand for it. O tempora, o mores. I'm glad things have changed through the efforts of scholars like Douglas Cairns and Dominic Berry and Mirko Cannavaro here at Edinburgh. And I think we can say that the study of oratory is now mainstream, I reckon. I would this evening I wish to give you some examples of how training in oratory was put into practice in Greco-Roman antiquity, basing the talk on the 5 parts or canons of rhetoric. So you can follow these on the handout is basically a printed version of this presentation with a bibliography. So you can follow either or neither. Invention, heuresis, inventio, was of course the first of the 5 parts. I've been working for over 12 years now on the Oxford text of Isaias that Dominic mentioned in his introduction. And he will be the focus, Isaias, not Dominic, of my Greek examples. As you know, Isaias' surviving speeches all concern inheritance cases. There's plenty of invention in them, both in the ancient sense of the word, discovering the necessary arguments, and in the modern sense of making it up. Isaias, whom modern scholars of Athenian law regularly regard as the orator who comes closest to being a legal expert because of his concentration on these complex inheritance cases, clearly has a thoroughgoing knowledge of the inheritance laws in particular. I forgot one of these. In what is the most complex of the cases we have, Isaiah 11 on the estate of Hagnias, the speaker, one Theopompus, is that right? No. It's Theopompus, has successfully claimed the estate of the long-deceased Hagnias, that's this one, against a woman called Philomachie, that one. who claimed to be Hagnias' first cousin once removed on his father's side by being the granddaughter of another Philomachy, up there, the sister of Hagnias' father Polemon. Don't worry about the complexities of this. Theopompus, however, satisfied a panel of jurors that the elder Philomachy was not a legitimate sister of Polemon. Consequently, the younger Philomachy was Hagnias' second cousin once removed through her great-grandfather Eubulides. It took me weeks to work all this out, and others, I suspect. Eubulides was the brother of Hagnias' grandfather Hagnias. Male names in Greek families skipped a generation, so the eldest son was named after his paternal grandfather, making life difficult for scholars 2,000 odd years later. Therefore, Theopompus the younger, the younger Hagnias' second cousin, was his closest relative, and he secured the estate. However, Theopompus had allegedly done a deal with his deceased brother Stratocles that he would give half the estate to Stratocles' son, and he was now being prosecuted for maltreatment of an orphan by another of the boy's guardians. And Isaeus wrote Theopompus' defense speech, in which he argues that the law of succession of collateral relatives, which distinguished close from more distant relatives, defined close relatives as being relatives as far as children of cousins. The legal problem is that the Greek word for cousin, anepsios, covered what we would call first cousins and second cousins. But it's not clear whether the phrase children of cousins means children of first cousins, that is, first cousins once removed, or of second cousins, i.e. children of a parent's first cousin. And it doesn't matter about this. But Theopompus was Hagnias' second cousin. And so if children of cousins in the law means first cousins once removed, he was outside the legal degree of kinship. But we know from a later speech in the Demosthenic corpus, 43 against Macartatus, that Theopompus won, and his own son Macartatus may also have won a subsequent case on this basis. So that is how the jurors in this case were persuaded by Isaeus to interpret the law. It's clear that the son of Theopompus' brother Stratocles, i.e. Theopompus' nephew, being the son of a second cousin, must have been outside the legal degree of kinship. But the argument of Theopompus' opponents will have been that Stratocles was equally entitled to inherit as his brother Theopompus, though he had not established his claim before his death, and so his son should have inherited Stratocles' share of the estate. And this is indeed what later happened with Theopompus' son Macartatus. But the jurors found in Theopompus' favour. Modern legal scholars have disputed whether Theopompus' arguments are sound, i.e. Isaeus discovered the arguments appropriate to the case, or whether he was in fact what J.K. Davies called him, a thorough-paced scoundrel, i.e. Isaeus made up or invented the arguments. But it's perhaps hardly surprising that the jurors found for him, especially when they listened to complex arguments based on the law, such as the one on the slide. Note the comparative argument and effective rhetorical question near the end. How then can those to whom the law does not award Hagnias' estate, even if I were dead, think that when I'm alive and in possession in accordance with the laws, they have the right of succession themselves? They cannot possibly think this. But if this is an example of invention in the area of logos, argument, invention might equally be applied to ethos, character, and pathos, emotions, as well, which